Which Rose Anvil wallet is right for you? If you want something that has room for more than a couple cards, but something without a fold and minimal enough that you're forced to carry only what you need, the SBB wallet is the perfect balance for you. With 3 total pockets, 2 in the front and 1 back pocket with room for folded cash, and measuring 5.6 millimeters thick, the SBB wallet is less of the bulk and more of the space. Get yours at roseanvil.com.
This is about to be the most comprehensive Danner video of all time, Danner Mountain Boot especially video of all time, because we just have all these videos that we've done over the last few years, and if you're trying to figure out everything you want to know about Danner Mountain Boots, you gotta go click on all these different videos, watch a playlist. So I thought it'd be kind of cool, and this is actually Keaton's idea, to cut everything together so you can watch the flow of information, how we learned it, what we changed our minds about over time, and what the end result was, and all in one comprehensive video with all the fluff cut out, all the ads and all the other stuff cut out. So let me know what you think of this, because I think it'd be really cool. I think this is maybe a style of video we'll start doing if you guys enjoy it, just to make it a little bit more of a resource for everybody. And it shows how, even as a reviewer, your opinion of certain things change over time as you get the context of people's feedback, as you see more footwear, and as you round out your information. So up first is the Danner Light 1. This is one of the most iconic boots in all of boot history, and it defined the iconic hiker style. But I got this boot in hand and it does not look like it's worth the price. So is this just another example of a brand claiming heritage that ends up just being a hoax? Or is this actually a good boot that represents the cool history and lineage and heritage of Danner? We're gonna find out by cutting it in half, running through the test to see if it's actually heritage or if it's all just a hoax. So what is this boot? Well, the brand is obviously Danner. The style is the Mountain Light Cascade. They weigh 1 pound, 12.5 ounces, and they retail for a steep $430, and they're made in the USA. Danner positions this boot as the Mountain Light Cascade is a tribute to one of Danner's iconic hiking styles introduced in the early 1970s, a style believed by many to be the greatest backpacking boot of all time. Made in our Portland, Oregon factory, the boot features a rich, full-grain leather upper and flat red laces. The rugged Vibram Kletterlift outsole is perfect for outdoors and casual use. So pretty bold claims about this being the greatest backpacking boot ever, but one word really stuck out to me, and that was tribute. And we've seen this used a few times by brands who have a reputable, good name to sell a really terrible product. So we're gonna try to find out if this is really one of the greatest backpacking boots of all time, or if it's just a tribute to one of the greatest backpacking boots of all time. Because there are a few things that do look like they're high quality and things that stand out that might justify some of that price, like the leather, because this is a really unique way of making a boot. Because if you notice, there is no seam for the vast majority of this boot as it wraps around to the one seam at the heel stay, or the heel counter, or the back stay, or whatever it's called. And that's because this is a hole cut boot. And what that means is it's pretty self-explanatory. It's like one cut of leather makes up the majority of the whole of the boot. And this is really popular for hiking boots because it doesn't give you any hard pinch points where multiple layers of leather are overlapping. It doesn't allow water to seep through the stitching to make your boots wet. And being one single piece of leather, it conforms and shapes to the shape of your foot. And it's 2.5 millimeters thick, so a good thickness for a dependable, durable boot. But because it is one solid piece of leather, when you lay this flat, it's like a big chunk of leather. And you can only get 3 or 4 pieces like that out of a hide because of how many blemishes are on a hide, because it's a cow that lived, and any hard bug bite or barbed wire scar is gonna show up. And so that's what's really actually impressive about this leather, is that it is a fairly natural leather. There's a little teeny bit of pigment put into it, but for the most part, this is a flawless piece of leather. And especially this being an American tanned leather, and it being a full grain leather, because we cut through the cross section and we can see that grain, and you'll notice there is that bluing on the inside, and that can be a sign of a really poor leather. So the reason they have that bluing on the inside is to get this light of a leather and to have these light undertones when you flex it. You can't have a dark dye all the way through the boot. You have to have as bright of a color on the inside to get those highlights, and that's why they leave the core of the leather. It's blue color caused by the chromium salts that convert the flesh into leather. So kind of an interesting little tidbit of leather info. So all in all, the leather is really good, and I can see how the whole cut could justify some of the price, but it's definitely not the whole reason why this boot is $430. So if we look at how this boot is made, it's in the 360 stitch down construction style, where the upper of the boot, instead of being tucked underneath and a welt sewn to it or glued to an outsole, they actually flare out and create a flange with the upper leather that then is sewn down through the midsole, or at least the slip sole, and then the outsole is glued on. So this is a really popular style of construction. You know, the Pacific Northwest use a 270 stitch down, Jim Green uses a stitch down construction. So we see it in more of the affordable boots, and we see it in the high-end work boots. So the pros of this style of construction is a little bit more watertight because you don't have as many holes going to the inside of the boot, and it's a simpler style of construction which makes it easier, faster, and more affordable to make, which does not make for a great argument for this boot being $430. And to test the waterproofness, we dunked it in the water tank, and it is actually fairly watertight. You know, we left it in for 5 minutes and there was just a little bit of water that seemed to be coming through the eyelets here. So with how this boot is made, it's not that it's a cheap style construction, but we just see it more often in the more affordable boots because it's easier, faster, and cheaper to make. So it's not an indicator of a poor quality boot, but for a $430 boot with not a whole lot of other things pointing to the value of being worth $430, I would say that's a, I would consider this maybe, so I would consider this a, so I would consider this, so I would say this, so I would say this construct, so I would say the construction, so I would say this, so I would say how this boot is made. So I would say the way this boot is built does not add any value and does not justify any additional cost above any other boot that's half the price of this boot. And there's one thing that I really do not like about this boot, and that is the jersey mesh liner on the inside of a hiking boot. You know, I see what they're doing because it's gonna be a little bit more breathable, it's gonna absorb your sweat, but the problem is if you're really using this as a hiking boot, this material is gonna wear out fairly quick, especially at the heel and especially at the toe because of how narrow this last is. You're just naturally gonna wear through that. And what most boots do to fix that is they'll use a more durable material, or they'll actually have a dedicated counter cover on the inside that won't wear through, because this jersey material will not last nearly as long as the rest of this boot. So to me, that does not scream quality, and that does not justify a price bump, especially up to $430. And the final thing I want to go over is where this boot really excels, and that's in the sole construction, because there's basically two types of boot soles. There's hard rubber soles that last a really long time, but they're really hard underfoot, and there's soft squishy soles that gives you all that comfort and all the squish underfoot so you don't wear your knees out and back out, your feet don't hurt at the end of the day. A lot of times you have to choose one or the other, but with this boot, they've combined the best of both worlds. You've got that thick, heritage, really hard rubber outsole skin, but then right above that, you have an entire layer of a softer foam that gives you the hard grip and durability of that rubber outsole, plus the soft squishiness of like a foam-based outsole. And so this is not a revolutionary thing. Lots of brands do this, but I really like this style of outsole and construction. So that doesn't necessarily add any value because we've seen boots cheaper than this use the exact same outsole construction. So now let's cut this thing in half and let's just pray that there's something on the inside, because we have not found enough quality things on the outside to justify that steep price tag of $430. So let's cut it in half. All right, we got it chopped in half. And once again, these are so pricey, $430 just to cut in half. So if you're not subscribed, consider subscribing, because that's how we pay for these boots, to show you exactly what you're spending your hard-earned money on. So just click that subscribe button if you haven't. So let's see what's inside. I honestly prepped the line. I was going, damn, Danner, but it didn't work, because everything that I hoped that was on the inside was not there, because all that's in here is the lining, the cheap fiberboard underneath, and one good thing, it does have a nice fiberglass shank. Nice touch there, Danner. I do actually like that a lot. And then you have a rubber slip sole, and then that foam midsole and the rubber outsole. And that's it. And it's not that those materials are bad or the techniques are bad, but usually you see this style of boot under $300. So after analyzing this boot, is there a case for that $430 price? Well, there's a couple points. It's made in the United States, it's a whole cut boot, and that's it. Because those are the only two things that we can identify by completely dissecting this boot that would justify any amount of price bump at all above a regular $200 boot that you would see this style construction on. So there's not a whole lot to point to justify the price until you remember that one word at the beginning of this video, tribute. And I think that's exactly what it is, and it's exactly what I had feared. I think what this shoe is Danner using their heritage name to make a tribute boot. Because, and the thing that's kind of a bummer about it is Danner specializes in combining heritage techniques with modern materials, as we see here. So on their most true heritage boot that has this cool history, it's the boot that built the brand, and to me, it's like the iconic hiker style leather boot. And if I were Danner and I was selling this time-honored brand building boot that's built the brand identity, I would try everything I could to make it as fairly priced as possible so people can understand the Danner heritage and feel almost like, it's kind of cheesy, but like feel the heritage, feel where the boots started and where they're at today. But instead, Danner seems to be charging a premium for these boots, which as a fan of Danner, it makes me feel like they're exploiting my love and nostalgia for Danner just to make a little bit more money. So Danner, just upcharge some of your other boots. Leave the heritage boots to your passionate fans, the brand lovers. Take care of the people and the products that have built your brand. So is this a heritage hoax? Yeah, I think it is, unfortunately. But to be 100% honest with you guys, they aren't so overpriced that I wouldn't buy a pair because I love the look, I love the brand, I love the story of the boot. But now you know you're paying for the nostalgia, for the brand tax, and you're paying $430 for a $250, maybe a $300 boot. So at least now you can make an educated decision instead of thinking you're buying one of the greatest backpacking boots of all time, when in reality you're buying a tribute to the greatest backpacking boot of all time. So as you can see, I was pretty negative at the beginning, and that's because I had high hopes for Danner's being a true heritage hiker, living up to that true heritage, full leather this, and all the old school ways that built the Danner boot into what it was. But after reviewing the comments and after talking to people and after that video launched, I was like, you know, they are a half casual boot. You know, the majority of people that are buying Danner hiking boots are buying their actual hiking boots. These are a heritage hiking boot, slowly been adopted by the mainstream, and so they've made them to fit what people actually want them for. It's not a hiking boot. It's a vintage hiker that people wear as a casual boot and a hiking boot. And you'll see my opinion change once again in this next video with the Danner Mountain Trail. This might be the most iconic, actually I think it is the most iconic hiking boot of all time. So what is this boot? Well, the brand is Danner, the style is the Mountain Trail. They weigh 1 pound 9 ounces. They retail for $420 and they're made in the United States. And the way that Danner positions this boot is built in our Portland, Oregon factory. The Danner Mountain Trail is based on one of our vintage silhouettes from the 60s. It features a domestically tanned leather and is leather lined. The Vibram Gum-Lite outsole is lightweight and cushioning while offering a solid tread for city to mountain escapes. And if you want a pair of these, check them out. Be linked in my description. On occasion, it helps the channel out. And so like I mentioned, we've already cut apart the Mountain Light 1, and I was less than impressed with it. But as a reviewer, you can't write off an entire brand or an entire boot line based off a single one. So that's why I wanted to do this, give it a fair shot and see if there is one of the boots in this lineup that solves the issues I had with this original boot. One of the issues was I just wish there was a leather lining. Another issue was it was more of a tribute boot rather than a dedicated hiking boot. The price seemed pretty high for what it was, and it seemed like you were paying a little bit of that icon tax, along with some of the things that I've somewhat reconsidered after looking at people's opinions on it, talking to a few other people. I think it's less overpriced than I initially thought, but through this video, we're gonna really figure out what's what, to see if there's any of these versions that fix all the problems I personally had subjectively, and if any of these are actually worth the price in my opinion. And so maybe that's why there's 5 different versions. Maybe it's just such a popular boot that they're able to do 5 different versions for 5 different purposes for 5 different demographics. I doubt it, but that's what we're gonna figure out, because there's very little information on the internet when you're trying to decide between these, which to me would be completely destroying sales of this boot, because you get what they call decision paralysis. It's the same reason why In-N-Out has like 3 options on their menu. They don't want you sitting there at the menu slowly deciding. They want to get people in and out, simple options. They don't want to lose customers because of decision paralysis. So let's start looking at this boot from the material standpoint, starting with the leather in the upper first. And this is the exact same leather as the Mountain Light 1. And I really like this leather. It's a slightly buffed leather, so it's a nice matte look to it. Plenty of the grain. It's 2.5 millimeters thick. And the thing that I like about it is if you look at the cross section, it's left blue on the inside, because when they take animal hides and they convert them into leather. For the vast majority of leathers, they use a chrome tanning process, which uses chromium salts to convert that rotting flesh into leather that doesn't rot. And at the end of that chrome tanning process, you're left with what's called wet blue, which is just like a baby blue version of leather. That's just, it's essentially the base of all leathers that are chrome tanned. And so sometimes on a lighter leather, they'll leave the core of the leather, that blue color, so that as you bend it and as you start wearing this, instead of darker colors coming out, you get a lot more of the highlights popping up as you bend it and fold it and get that pull up because the core is lighter. And so to get that look, and that's why Oral Legacy leather is the same way. I think I have one right here. Red Wings Oral Legacy leather, exact same concept. To get this bright orange pop, this is a terrible example because it's like waxed, but they leave that core blue. On really cheap leathers, they'll do it too, but it's because they're trying to be cheap and they don't want to redo the retanning all the way through. And it can, and so to try to tell the difference, we can go over that in one of these other videos. But basically, if it feels cheap, it's probably cheap if it's blued on the inside. If it feels like it's a decent leather and has a nice heft to it, and it doesn't feel foamy and feels like it has some conditioning and oils and waxes infused into it, it's probably a decent leather. But just to double check, we burned the top coat to see if there's any plastic on top. There wasn't any. It seemed like there's just a little bit of pigment to give it a little more even of a finish, which is very important for this hole cut boot, which we'll kind of go over in a little bit and why that's so hard and why I've slightly changed some of my pricing opinions on these boots because of that. And we did the puncture test as well. It performed basically the exact same as the Mountain Lights. And there's nothing to point to that says it's not a high quality leather. So overall, no complaints with the leather, but you can see now why hole cut boots are such a pain to make and are crazy expensive. Because if you look at this pattern that we're gonna put on screen of how big the surface area is to make this boot, and now you look at a leather hide and you realize, oh, this is the skin of an animal. So if they've got any barbed wire scars, any bug bites, any just general scars, any brands, you can't use that on the hole cut boot because people complain about it. Somehow they forget that leather is literally cow flesh and it has flaws in it. And they demand a perfect piece of leather, especially on an expensive hole cut boot. And a lot of times they can get one or two pairs tops out of a hide. Usually it's like one pair, if even a full pair out of a hide of leather, because there's just so many flaws in it. So I think in the initial video, I underappreciated that aspect of it. And as a reviewer, you have to be open to being reviewed and change your opinions on things. But I'm not convinced it's still worth the price. So we'll kind of figure that out as the series goes along. But if we start looking at the inside, this is another issue that I mentioned that this boot actually fixes, because you know, this Mountain Light is a waterproof boot, so you have a fabric lining, because that's very standard for that, because you know, this lining on the inside, it wicks moisture so it doesn't get as hot, and it's just easier to make a waterproof lined boot with fabric rather than leather, because you can easily puncture through that waterproof membrane while sewing a lot heavier leather. So if you look at this boot, the Mountain Trail, I think is what it's called, Mountain Trail, you can see this baby is leather lined all the way to the toe of the boot, and it even has a half sock liner for the insole. And this leather is 1 millimeter thick. It's basically a thinner version and a lining version of the outer leather. It still has the grain in it, but it has more pigment than the outer leather, which I like more natural leather, but lining leathers are often heavily pigmented because it's a cheaper leather, because they don't need to show the visual aspects of the lining. And so most of the time you're gonna have a heavy pigment on it just to hide the flaws from a lining leather. And to double check that, we burned it. There's no plastic in it. It's just pigment. And all that really is just a really thin layer of paint in this color. So big fan of the leather lining, love that. I wish it was in every single one of the Danner boots, because I just don't like synthetic liners. They wear out a little bit quicker, but if you want the waterproofing, you almost have to have it, at least most of the time. And this boot isn't waterproof, so I think that's why they did the leather lining in this one. But to see how water resistant this is, we still did the waterproof test on it, and it still is surprisingly water resistant. It's not waterproof, but it is water resistant. So part of me is like, this might already be the one. Like, this might be the Danner mountain hiking boot that I've been looking for. But we'll see. Still got plenty of boots to cut in half. But from the description and from not having waterproof lining and from the outsole, it seems like this is leaning a little bit more towards the casual end of the spectrum. So we're gonna make a little graph for this series where the x-axis is gonna be durability and comfort, because they usually are inverse, or they run counter to each other, you know what I'm trying to say. Then the y-axis is gonna be form and function. And then we're gonna update this as we go along, so you can visually see how they're plotted on all these graphs to help you make a decision and condense basically couple hours worth of these videos into one graph that you can just read. So at the end of this video, we'll put it on that chart and also start a ranking board for this series. And like I mentioned, the outsole seems a little bit more of a casual outsole, because if you look at this compared to the Mountain Light 1, it looks identical. From 10 feet away, from 5 feet away, you'd assume it's the exact same boot, exact same outsole. But if you look really close, you can see that the Mountain Light, if you haven't seen that video, go watch it. This is a 2-part midsole outsole where you've got this harder Vibram rubber skin for the outsole, and then this a little bit slightly different textured layer is all the foam that gives you a little bit of squish. And I love this style of construction. I think it might be my perfect way to make a hiking boot, because you get just enough squish, but you still get the hard wearing traction of a Vibram outsole. That's why we put it on the Indy 3, because I've yet to see a better hiking outsole for a traditional boot. How is that compared to the Mountain Trail? Well, this is just all foam. So this looks like it's a hard rubber outsole, but it's, instead of the midsole and outsole being foam and rubber, it's just one single unit of a little bit harder foam. And so that's clearly not a dedicated hiking outsole. They call it the Gum Light outsole, assuming because gum and light is more comfortable and more casual. The durometer of it's like 55 to 60. On the sidewall, it's a 36 Shore A. So this is around the softness of the Vibram wedge outsoles that a lot of people are more foam, not the Christie's, the really soft wedge. And we ran our standard test on it. The bar drop, it bounced up 5 inches, so a lot of rebound for a boot. The puncture test took 176 pounds. So even though it's a soft outsole, it's still gonna protect you, and it still has all that structure and rigidity, just a little less rigidity. The downside of that is it's gonna wear out faster. It's not gonna be nearly as grippy, and you're gonna wear down those lugs a lot faster than if it's a really hard rubber that's more of a 70 Shore A. The benefits of this outsole is gonna be a lot more squishy underfoot. It's gonna be a lot more comfortable right off the bat. It's gonna be more flexible. And that's essentially what this is. This is a casual outsole that is made to look like a hiking outsole. So I think that might be what this boot is. And the last thing to go over really briefly is the construction, or how they attach the top of the boot to the bottom of the boot. I was a little bit afraid that one of these would be glued together, but if any of them are gonna be glued, it's gonna be this one. But you can see it's still a 360 stitch down construction, just like the Mountain Light, and hopefully like all the other ones. So solid construction, but we don't know because we haven't cut it in half. So let's cut it in half, see what's on the inside, and really see how this boot ranks, and if this is the one Danner mountain boot that I've been looking for. That works. All right, we got it cut in half, and if you're not subscribed, consider doing it. So, we'll see what's inside. Oh, it's the wrong boot. That's how confusing this is. This is the Trail 1. This is a confusing series. We're gonna have to figure out a way to make this super clear. Now let's see what's inside the correct boot. So what's on the inside? Well, we've got a fiberglass shank, a synthetic counter, a fiberboard lasting board, which is basically identical to the Mountain Light 1, and still has that big rubber midsole. But one thing I don't like is in the forefoot, the ball of the foot, you're just standing on some open cell foam. You know, it's not even like a harder foam. And so to me, that would be a little bit of cause for concern of that wearing out prematurely. But it also points to the fact that this is clearly a more casual boot. But one way they could easily fix that is just extend that sock liner all the way down, and then you're standing on leather on top of the foam, which is gonna make it a lot more durable. So what is this version of the famous Danner mountain boots intended for? Well, this is clearly the casual version of the mountain boot, made for style, made for casual wear, when you can still kind of hike in it, but this is for a lot of the people who like this style, but they don't want the weight, they don't want the hardness, they don't want how rigid it is. They want a casual version because they just want the style and they want to wear it around the streets, they want to wear it for fashion, whatever. And so that's exactly what this is. And this is how it ranks on our new board that we've yet to name. I'd put it right there, really far on the comfort and the casual end of things. But these are gonna move as we go along because without something to contrast it and compare it to, it's hard to know where it actually lies. So the ultimate question though, to me, is after the initial video, when I was like, it seemed pretty overpriced, is this still overpriced? Is it worth the price? Basically, how does this compare to the other boots in this market around this price range? Because I still think you're paying for the made in the USA. Obviously, there's a premium with that. You're clearly having to pay extra because of the whole cut leather, and I've changed my opinion a little bit on that. And I still think you're paying a little bit of the premium iconic boot tax that comes along with a lot of these boots. So is it enough to dissuade me from buying this boot if this was my ideal version? No, because even in the first video, I still was a little bit like, it's a little bit overpriced, but like I love this boot so much. It's an icon. There's only really one brand that's making it. And for that, it wouldn't dissuade me, even though I felt like it was overpriced. And I still think that stands with this boot. Because if I wanted a really casual version of this mountain boot, literally just for style, this is the one to get so far. So I think it is more expensive than if another brand made it in a very similar way with similar components. And lots of people are willing to pay a premium for an iconic boot, even if it's cheaper. It's the whole Alden thing that really showed me how willing people are to pay for an iconic boot, and that's exactly what this is. And hopefully now you know which of these versions is the most casual, because I can't imagine any of the other ones being more casual than this. So this is where my opinions really started to change with Danner, and I wasn't quite fully on board with it yet. Once again, on that kind of journey of understanding what these boots are. It's not just as simple as like, are these good, are these bad? That's where it starts, but you need to start rounding out that information with the cultural significance, what people are actually using them for, how the times have changed in the last 70 years since this boot was invented. And that's where it really became obvious. They were making these shoes in a different way for a different purpose and a different consumer than what they were originally designed for. But I was still hoping there was like one hardcore old school Danner mountain boot out there with the leather lining. You know, I was holding out hope. And so we'll see in the next video. A lot of people have no idea that Rose Anvil started as a leather goods company and especially a camera gear company, because in 2018, we launched our very first, well, a second Kickstarter, raised $500,000 for a camera harness. COVID hit immediately after, and so we started cutting boots and shoes in half from a professional leather worker's perspective. And then that whole thing happened, you know, now we're nearly at 1 million subscribers. But I finally got around to designing all the rest of the camera gear that I've been wanting to release for like the last 5 years, starting with the little slim wrist strap, cinches down, hand sewn. It's our belt thickness leather, so it's super sturdy. Our slim neck strap, same kind of concept. Really simple attachments, all brass, hand sewn details, a little neck piece there. The lasso link, which is one of my favorites because this thing is super articulate. You see all these little individual pieces and how they flow and move around. Our Lone Bandit that you've probably heard me talking about plenty. It holds one camera at about as comfortably as humanly possible because it distributes your weight over a larger surface area. And then the Big Daddy, the full Bandit harness. This carries 2 to 3 cameras because you can get a third camera attachment with the Pro package, and everything is designed by me and handmade right here in the shop. So if you need to get some Christmas gifts, some birthday gifts, if you need to upgrade your camera gear, or if you got an old camera just sitting around, you need a good excuse to pull it out, get yourself a little strap, check them out below, and thanks for supporting our handmade leather goods that makes this whole channel possible. Why are there 2 Danner mountain lights? Because they look nearly identical, at least from the outside. So today we're gonna cut the mountain light 2s in half, run them through our tester to really try to figure out why there's so many versions of one of the most iconic hiking boots of all time. But in this video, we're gonna just mostly compare the Danner Mountain Light 1 against the Danner Mountain Light 2. So what is this boot? Well, obviously the brand's Danner, the style's the Mountain Light 2. They weigh 2 pounds, 2 ounces. They retail for $440, $10 more than the Mountain Light 1s. And they're made in the United States. And the way that this boot is positioned by Danner is legendary among hikers and backpackers worldwide. The US made Mountain Light hiking boot is legendary for its unmatched quality, durability, and support. If you want a pair of these, check them out via links in my description. So now let's start figuring out what the real difference is between these, starting with the leather first, because they both have the exact same hole cut pattern. That's part of why these boots are so expensive and what makes them such a good hiking boot, because there's no hard seams. It just kind of all rolls and folds naturally without break points. But there are some differences because the 2 has a lot more pigment on top. It's a lot more even of a finish versus the 1s are a more natural leather with very little pigment on it. And we also burned it with the lighter to see if it was just pigment or if there's plastic in it. And it looks like it's all just pigment, which is good to see because I hate plastic on leather. And there is a difference between the thicknesses because the 2s are 2.1 millimeters thick and the 1s are 2.4 millimeters thick. And that could easily be a difference between the hides they used, you know, because it's still 0.3 millimeters difference. And we ran the puncture test. They seemed about around the same range. So really very, very similar leathers between the 2. I thought for sure there'd be more difference. And out of the 2, which is the better leather in my opinion, I like the 1s. This Cascade leather is more natural and it just looks better to me, and it's gonna age a lot more heavily. This will stay a lot more true to its initial color, but I like watching boots age. What about the lining in the inside of these boots? Because you'll notice there is a difference between these 2. The 2s have a Gore-Tex lining to make them waterproof. The 1s do not, but this is because it's not the Gore-Tex version. They also have a Gore-Tex version that has the exact same waterproof lining as well, assumingly. They both have the leather collar around the top and the leather on the tongue here. And so really it doesn't seem like there's much difference at all between the insides, or the linings at least. But I did want to see if this leather is more waterproof, so we put it in the waterproof tank up to, you know, 3 or 4 inches, stayed pretty waterproof, but this leather did absorb the water just the same way the Cascade did. So I think that pigment isn't preventing water absorbing into the leather. And then we obviously brought the water up a little bit higher to see how high it is waterproof. And that is one flaw with this boot, because if you look, that's really only gusseted up to here, because that gusset folds and the tongue is folded. So it's really not that waterproof of a boot above 3 or 4 inches on both of them. So once again, really no difference there, but there is one difference in the insoles, because the 1 doesn't come with a removable insole. You're just standing on top of a lining with foam underneath. But the 2s did come with these weird little plastic like arch supports. They call them orthotics, and it's patented. So it must be something that they put some time and energy into. But I put them in and they just are uncomfortable. I don't really know what these are for. I'm confused. I just don't know what they are. So it doesn't really seem like there's a lot more support. Maybe we missed it. Maybe there's an insole that's supposed to go in on top of these that maybe we just didn't get it, but I don't know what these are. So it is a difference though. And assuming it's more of a performance thing, take that for what it's worth. Then if we start looking at the sole construction, it has these both have the exact same midsole foam. They come in at 45 Shore A, about the same thicknesses through all the way. There is a difference in the layer above it, which is still technically the midsole. You could call it a slip sole. It's what the stitch down construction, which both of these have the exact same, is sewn down to, and then that foam is glued onto it. And they both have that layer, but the 1 is a little bit thinner than the 2. You know, it's a very slight difference. It's gotta be only 2 or 3 millimeters, but it is different. Is there a performance difference between the 2? The thicker one's gonna be more rigid, and so maybe that makes it slightly more ready for an intense hike, because really intense hikes, people like really firm and non-bending boots. But they could also easily just be one batch they use a slightly thicker rubber, and this batch they didn't, because it's not that big of a difference. And even the outsoles are the same. This is the Vibram Kletter Lift outsole. It's a skin that you can put on that you can kind of shape whatever shape you want. So it becomes a really versatile outsole that I really, really like. But they're the exact same. But they make a really good hiking outsole. And this is one difference between the Mountain Trail that was I think it was Mountain Trail, although I can't keep any of the names straight, but it was just a solid foam outsole. So both of these are clearly more function-based and more hiking-based and less casual. And then lastly, to the construction, which we already said, they're both a stitch-down construction, a single row of stitching, and they're even built on the same last. It's a 650 last, but the 2s do come in the double E width and the D width, whereas the 1s just come in the double E width. But honestly, they're really narrow as is. And both of these are the double E versions. So keep that in mind when if you're buying a pair of these. They're pretty narrow, even the double E widths. But they're very much the exact same boot. So hopefully there's something different on the inside. So let's cut them in half, find out, because maybe they're the same boot, just slightly different models or colors. I'm not sure. So let's cut them in half. This stuff is pretty hard to cut. I wonder if it is more durable than it seems. All right, we got them cut in half. So let's see what's inside and if there's actually any differences between the two boots. So now we can actually see that these boots have the exact same heel counter, the same toe stiffener, same layer of foam underneath of the insole material, same fiberboard lasting board, same fiberglass shank, and we pretty much identified everything else. So what is the actual difference of these boots besides the things we identified with the insert, the leather, the lining kinda, and the available widths? Well, the only difference that I can really see is that rubber slip sole. Now that we have it cut in half, we can confirm it is thicker. But other than that, I don't see any difference between these boots anywhere. Everything is nearly identical. So if they're nearly identical, what is this boot actually for? Well, this is not nearly as casual as the Mountain Trail that we cut last time with that soft outsole I was talking about. It's slightly less casual than the Mountain Light 1 for those small differences in materials. So I would say that this is a dedicated old school hiking boot, upgraded with some of the more modern materials that some people like, some people don't, and part of this series is me trying to find a fully leather lined one, which the Trail was. But because it's waterproof, it makes sense that they have to do with somewhat of a synthetic lining. So which do I like more out of the one and the two? I think I like the one more because the leather's better, or I like the leather better personally. It's very similar qualities. I just like less pigment. And you know, it's a little bit more flexible because that midsole or that slip sole rubber is a little bit thinner, but more than anything, I just like the way it looks more. I like these colors more, I like that leather more. It's gonna age more, it's gonna age with more patina rather than this two is gonna just stay pretty much the same color. And honestly, that's not enough to really point to which one's better and worse because they're so close to being the same boot. I have no idea, but the Light 2 and the Light 1 are essentially the same boot. So then how do we rank this on our little Mountain Series graph chart, I guess it's chart. I'd put the one more towards the form and durability part of the chart versus the two. I'd put slightly more towards the functionality because of those things that we talked about. So since recording that, we found out that you can get a waterproof version, which blurs the lines even more. And that's the other part of this is like, you're like, what? Why is there not just one Danner Mountain boot? Like, why is there 15 different variations? Why would you want one for a certain purpose? Like what, they don't really explain what the differences of the one and the two in the past and this. And so that's another part of this video is just trying to parse out like, what is each boot for? Like why would how do I even choose between these like 6 different boots? Which hopefully we'll answer in the next video. If this is my perfect Danner Mountain boot. So what is this boot? Well, the brand is Danner. The style is the Mountain Pass. And you can see, trying our best to keep all these things wrangled and straight because I can't keep them straight. And so we literally put hang tags on every single one and every part. They weigh 1 pound, 10 ounces, a little bit lighter than some of the others. They retail for $430. They're made in the United States. And the way that Danner positions this boot is made in our Portland, Oregon factory. The Mountain Pass was created to be a lightweight and more versatile hiking boot that still reflects our classic Danner styling. Built with light hikes and city streets in mind, the overall design is inspired by our original Mountain Light, which is here. Let me double check. With an updated construction method that integrates the shank, midsole, and lasting board into a single piece. This new unified platform combined with a low-profile Vibram outsole allows us to significantly reduce the weight and create an out-of-the-box comfort that doesn't come standard with most classic hiking boots. So at least one of the 4 pretty well describes what they wanted to make with this boot, how they wanted to position it, and what it might be intended for. It makes my job a little bit easier, but it's still different enough, and there's some really interesting things with this boot that makes it potentially my favorite. First of all is the leather, because this is a Horween Chrome Excel leather. The rest have been pretty decent leathers, but if you don't know, Chrome Excel is a really, really famous and popular leather because it's really saturated with oils and waxes and conditioners. It just has a really distinct smell. I actually didn't know that this was Chrome Excel until we started planning it. I was like, there's no way it's Chrome Excel. And then I gave it a sniff test. And it definitely smells just like Chrome Excel because it has a very sweet, unique flavor to scent to it. I haven't eaten any, I promise. But to see how good this leather is, we measured the thickness. It's 2.1 millimeters, so pretty close to the rest of the boots. And we cut a cross section out of it to look at how much grain is on the inside of this leather. You can see there's plenty of grain, you know, and Chrome Excel is a buffed surface leather, so it's technically a full grain leather. And one interesting thing is if you look at the cross section, you can see how blue it is. And we've talked about this before with the other boots, but it allows you to have a little bit more rich light color by allowing those highlights to pop through when you bend and crease it by having such a light core. And we also ran the puncture test and it took 95.5 pounds of puncture through, so a pretty decent score, nothing crazy but not bad. And we also ran the waterproof test on them, and this isn't a waterproof boot. It doesn't have a waterproof lining or anything, so we dunked it in and it kept the water out for the most part, and it didn't completely soak after 5 minutes, but the water definitely did slowly start seeping in. And along with the upper, there is a few changes that they did to the patterning, because you can see the tongue is sewn on in 2 spots rather than it being integrated into that hole cut. You can see there's an extra cutout here in the medial part of the shaft of the boot, where this one's a true hole cut. The lacing doesn't run quite as far down the toe as the regular versions. Also still built with the stitch down construction as the rest of them. But another thing that's different is the last that it's built on. It's not quite the same narrow last as the traditional ones. This is their 503 last that's really close, just a little bit wider. And I really like this collar. This is like the different colored collar, and it's a little bit thinner leather. It's a little more flexible, and it just has a really unique look to it that the other boots don't have. And I love the look of that. And as soon as I saw it on the website, and even when they got here, I tried not to spoil everything before I did the reviews. I thought for sure this thing was leather lined all the way through. I was like, Horween leather, like this cool, like integrated collar. It's a little bit wider, all these things. And then we got it and started reviewing it, and it is fabric lined, unfortunately, for me specifically. Lots of people like fabric liners. For me, on a heritage style boot, I was really hoping one of these had a full leather lining. I guess the Trail does, but there was some other issues with it, and it's a lot more of a casual boot. So what is this lining on the inside? Well, it's their Drylex lining, which they say is ideal for warm to hot conditions. Drylex provides excellent vapor transport, is extremely quick drying, resistant to odor and mildew, and is completely breathable. So, you know, any type of lining stuff like that, it's hard to know what's real and what's just marketing jargon, but it does feel like a little stronger and more durable fabric than the other boots that have just this really basic jersey fabric on the inside. So out of the fabrics, I like that one the most. And like I mentioned, it's not waterproof. There's no Gore-Tex linings. You can't get a Gore-Tex lining option in this boot. And if you look at the insole, you can see it's just a very classic Ortholite insole. It's open cell foam. You see these in a lot of boots. It is pretty comfortable for an open cell foam insole, but it's really nothing like built for hiking or anything, or even those plastic inserts that we saw on the Trail 2. Nope, Light 2. It's hard to remember all these. And then if we look at the rest of the boot, you can see the outsole looks like it's just like the Mountain Light 1 and 2 with this Kletter lift outsole. And it is, but it's a light version. So you can see that the lugs aren't quite as deep, a little more shallow, so it's gonna be more flexible, less durable, less grip, but it is their more casual version of this outsole. I'd personally rather just have the big chunky one if we're doing it. But it does have the exact same foam through the midsole. It gives you that squish that makes these boots really comfortable while still maintaining the grip of this rubber outsole. And it's also the same hardness at a 30 short 8. We also ran the bar drop test, bounced at 4.5 inches. We ran the puncture test, and it took a lot, 243 pounds of puncture through. So that bifit board might have something to do with why it's so hard to puncture through, because it feels like it's a harder rubber. And speaking of that harder rubber, that's the last thing that we really can see from the outside is that bifit board that combines the shank, lasting board, and midsole. I don't really know exactly how that works, but you can see it's like some sort of harder rubber compared to the other boots that have like more of a true rubber midsole. So I'm interested to see how that's constructed on the inside, how they're able to do that. Is it just a gimmick to cheapen out the boots and be like, oh, it combines all those things and it's all just like one layer? That could easily be it. So that's everything from the outside. Let's cut this thing in half and see if this bifit board is actually integrated into it with all these things, or if it's just a hard layer that they're kind of pretending it has other features. So let's cut them in half. All right, we got it cut in half, and there is some differences on the inside. So let's see what's inside. So is this bifit board just all gimmick and BS marketing? I don't think so. It seems like there is clear intentions in this part of the boot because you can see it is a harder material. Feels more like a plasticky composite shank material, but you can see there's columns here, I'm assuming to give that shank area some extra support. And then you can see here at the heel, it has a cutout where a foam patch is at the heel. So I think there's a circle on the inside that cuts out to give you a little bit more squish in the heel because we learned from the On shoes, it can be really hard to have that integrated full length shank underneath your foot. So I like that a lot. And even the lasting board's different because the others just have this thinner white lasting board. This has that traditional pink Texon fiberboard looking material that's gonna compress a little bit more. It's allegedly a little more durable. And obviously there's no fiberglass shank on the inside because it has that integrated one. So I don't think it's BS. I think they actually pulled that off. Is it gonna perform as well as the others? Is it gonna perform as well as the fiberglass shank? Probably not. But for what it's intended for, it seems like it isn't just BS and there was thought that went into it. And now how does this rank on our graph to really figure out what these boots are for and which one you'd want for certain reasons? Well, this one pretty clearly sits between the Mountain Trail, it's super casual, and the Mountain Light 1 that's slightly more casual than the Mountain Light 2. It sits right in between them, and this is that sweet spot for me. This is exactly what I would want for a light, casual hiking boot that I could still wear wherever I wanted. I'm still getting some of the quality and support and durability of the other ones, but less weight, and honestly, it's a better looking boot. Out of all the mountain boots, this one is by far my favorite. I love the look of this boot. Everything about it, through and through, I like more than the other boots. But does that mean this is the perfect mountain boot for me? No, because I was really hoping one of these had that full leather lining because I really was hoping that Danner had one true, traditionally made hiking boot, but none of these really are. I love this boot. It's a traditional hiking boot. It's the one that built this whole hiking boot style in the, I think the 70s, and it's somehow still around today, still being made, but it's not built to the same standard that I think the 70s were built to. But we don't really know. So hopefully we'll be able to find like a really old Danner to cut in half. So finally, I found a classic Danner boot that I actually liked. Was it perfect? No, it was pretty far from perfect, or at least my perfect version of it. But now we found at least a version I really liked. We're gonna go a little bit into the future, into the modernized version of the classic Danner boots with their more modern hybrid styles. The Danner Mountain boot is one of the most iconic boots of all time. When you think about vintage hiking boots, you probably pictured this exact boot. Then I saw this boot, and this seems like they're trying to take that mountain boot, and instead of moving the tech backwards to historical, traditional heritage stuff, they're trying to move it forward. So we're gonna cut this thing in half and run it through our test to really see how do these compare, not just to the original mountain boots, but to the specific hiking boots that we did as a series just recently. They say it's their first recraftable lightweight hiker, but is it actually recraftable, resolable, and how? And is this the future of the iconic mountain boot, or is it just a flop? So then what is this boot? Well, the brand is Huckberry x Danner. It's a collaboration off of the style, which is the Mountain 600 GTX boot. It's just the Huckberry rendition. They weigh 1 pound, 6 ounces. They retail for $220, which is the exact same price as the non-collaboration versions. They're made in Vietnam. And the way that they position this is the Mountain 600 GTX is a fresh take on our best-selling hiking boot that's designed with the future in mind. It's the first recraftable Mountain 600, meaning our dedicated team can resole and recondition your boot to keep them on trail for years to come. With 100% waterproof Gore-Tex liners made from recyclable materials and dependable Vibram outsole with Mega Grip technology, the Mountain 600 GTX inspires you to keep exploring beyond the familiar. And if you want to pair these, check them out via links in my description. This is an exclusive collaboration with Huckberry, and thanks to Huckberry for sponsoring this video. And so now I'll start going through the details, because one of the coolest things about this is this really woolly and fuzzy suede that they put over top of this. And I obviously love like really woolly stuff. That's why we did the reverse bison on the bear slayer. So as soon as I saw this, I was like, I want those. It looks like a woolly mammoth, like a golden woolly mammoth. But my concern is how thick is this suede? Because suede is that lower cross section. It's more abrasion resistant. That's probably why they used it on this boot so it doesn't scratch up. You don't have that really tight grain pattern holding all these loose fibers together. And so if it's really thin, it can come unraveled. If it's thick enough, it'll kind of hold itself together, and if it's backed, it will. So how does this look? Well, we cut a little section out of it, and it's surprisingly 2 millimeters thick. It's really, really soft. I thought it was gonna be like a little bit thinner, but 2 millimeters is pretty thick. It's in that boot thickness. It's also backed by a material that acts as the grain to structure it so it doesn't overstretch. And one thing I really like is you can see they really pulled inspiration from the original mountain boot. You know, this is not a hole cut. You can see the seams here, but it's made to look like a hole cut, you know, paying homage to the OG mountain boot. It also has this material that wraps all the way around, acting as a bumper and up the heel as well. And I thought for sure this was fake leather. I was like, damn, of course there's got, like, I love this boot. Of course it's gotta have a little bit of fake leather on it. But then we burned it and it's real leather. It just kind of has that blue, black kind of hue of fake leather. And that's the value of like actually cutting these and like actually testing them and burning them. Because I honestly would have said that this was fake leather unless I looked really, really closely. But it is a really heavily coated leather. Like this basically is just a really heavy plastic on top. We burned it and you can see it fizzling and burning off. And on occasion, there's a reason why they do that. And this is that occasion because it is more wear resistant. But keep in mind, as you do wear that off, that top coat is going to come off and it's not going to be this like really nice gradient patina. You get the extra durability out of it, but it's going to start flaking and chunking. It's like this is just me simulating some wear. So actually it's pretty strong, you know, but you're going to get to the point where you kick a few rocks and that black starts showing through. The function of it is to be more durable because they have that heavy coat over top, that texture over top, but it's going to start showing that black through when you really start beating these up. But at least it's real leather, and it's, I didn't even measure actually. It is 1.8, 2 millimeters thick as well. So don't love that plastic coating, but it makes sense. Then up here on the collar, I'm assuming this is where they start putting in some of the recycled materials. You know, it seems like it's a little more like abrasion resistant, heavy weave canvas. And that same material is used as the gusset for the tongue, whereas the original mountain boots, one of the coolest things of it's like this giant accordion leather tongue, but it's a pain. It's a lot of leather to break in over top of your foot. Or this is like obviously a more modern version with a canvas style bellows tongue. And overall, you know, like just that pattern, lace to toe is very similar. Everything looks very similar. It does look like a modernized version of this 60 or 70-year-old boot. But is the quality there? That's the big concern for me, because if you start looking at the inside, where a lot of these synthetic boots, like from the series, the Loas, and the Solomons, which are probably the top two of that series, they basically are all built the same. You know, they have this chevron pattern, like quick drying, breathable material for the lining, same thing as this Danner. Neither of them have an internal counter cover, neither does the Danner. You pull out the insole, and it's just like an open cell foam. So internally, it's on par with all the rest of them. I wish it had an internal counter cover, you know, like I always do with every single boot, but it's hard to do that with the waterproof lining. And so we wanted to test if that waterproof lining actually works, and it passed flying colors. This suede leather does absorb a lot more water because it's a lot more open. I try to visualize it in like, suede is a lot more open, so it's like an open sponge absorbing water, versus if you took a squished sponge and tried to get it to absorb water, there's just not as much open air on the inside for that water to displace the air so it absorbs it. And that waterproof lining is a Gore-Tex lining, and that's something that, like, it's crazy how much there is to learn in the footwear industry, because we just learned that like Gore-Tex is really, really specific about like who claims it's Gore-Tex. You have to send them a pair of boots to have it tested. If it doesn't pass, you can't use the Gore-Tex name. And so anytime you see that Gore-Tex logo here, it's usually an indicator that it does pass Gore-Tex's standard for waterproof. Then if we look at the midsole, this is where it starts to get really interesting, because if you look at this, it looks no different than the Solomons. It looks no different than the Loas in the general construction, with the rubber outsole, a foam midsole, and no traditional stitching holding it all together. So I found it odd that there's no like external stitching that you could resole, because this is clearly a soft foam midsole. It comes in like a 15 to 20 Shore A, so really, really soft. They say it's a rubberized EVA, so the rubber allegedly kind of strengthens the EVA, because EVA foam it will compress faster than like a polyurethane foam, but you get a lot more squish. So by rubberizing it, the idea is you get a little bit more rebound, kind of bridging the gap between EVA and polyurethane foam. And you can see they also have this hard bumper that wraps around the heel, kind of like a New Balance. So I'm wondering if that has something to do with it. Because if you look at the outsole, same thing. There's nothing traditional about it. Like they said in the description, it's that mega grip outsole. We've seen it used a few different times, and it, you know, compared to these other hiking boots, it's right on par. You know, some of them had a little bit more aggressive lugs. This is a little bit closer to the more foam-based hikers, because it is a lot more articulate. You can see these relief cuts, but they're still pretty heavy lugs that are anywhere from like 4 to 6 millimeters deep. And then you also have that split heel that we saw in the, what was it, like Hoka's? Very minimal, but it is still that split heel. And this outsole is going to be pretty tough too. It comes at a 65 Shore A, so a little bit softer than like a really hard work boot leather, but still hard enough you're going to get grip, and it's going to last a decently long time. So that's everything from the outside. Let's cut this thing in half and really figure out if it is actually resolable and recraftable, how it all works on the inside, and if there's just a bunch of junk hidden on the inside, or if it's up to the rest of the boots in this category standard. right, we got them cut in half, and if you're not subscribed, consider subscribing. It's just one little click. If you're already subscribed, give us a like, give us a comment, and let's see what's inside this boot. So surprisingly, very similar to the rest of these hiking boots that we reviewed. It's very similar to the Salomon's even, because you've got that Strobel stitch lasting material. The Danners do have just a little bit of extra foam between that and that harder lasting board that is basically in every single one of these boots. A synthetic shank, which is basically in every single one of these boots. That really soft foam midsole, which is on par with the rest of these boots, and then that skin style outsole. So everything on the inside is on par. You know, it's at $220. The rest of these are $220, $230. It looks almost identical on the inside. So then how is this thing recraftable? Because these are not, you know, like as far as I understand, like the brands aren't like, hey, send us your boots, we'll resell them, like Danner's saying. So how do they do it? Well, one thing that's different from this boot, from some of the other ones, is this one's not direct injected. Direct injected is when they pour liquid, hot, uncured foam into a mold, and then it fuses with air and it dries and cures and it bonds to every single square inch of wherever you're bonding it to. Versus a cemented construction is you just put a little glue on there, attach it, and a lot of force solidifies that glue, making a strong bond. But direct injected, 9 times out of 10 is gonna be a lot more durable than just a glued construction or cemented construction. But you exchange that extra durability of a direct injected construction for the ability to send these into Danner for a resole. And because they have to be able to submit a new midsole, outsole unit on, they can't just redo the direct injected construction. And maybe the best solution is just initially have it direct injected, then make the midsole, outsole unit separately, but the increased expense of 2 different sets of molds for all the different sizes and all the other expenses involved with that wouldn't make a lot of sense for Danner, especially with the size of business they are. So like most things in the footwear world, it's a trade-off either way. But the more important question to me is how much does it cost to get a resole, and are they even capable of resoling your boots if you beat them to death? Well, fortunately, Danner has a resole calculator on their site, and if you just need the resole without the upper repairs of any kind, it's gonna cost you exactly $100, which includes replacing the outsole, midsole, insole laces, and reconditioning the upper, and they'll ship it back to you for free. But if there's any holes in the upper that you want fixed, they won't fix it. If there's any holes or tears in the eye stays, they also won't fix it. They will only fix the midsole, outsole layers when you need a resole. But at least Danner is still trying to make modern boots resolable, and they tell you up front exactly how much it's gonna cost you and what they will resole and what they won't. And we've seen a similar thing recently from a work boot brand called Duradero, but you pay that $100 up front that's baked into the price of the boot. Instead of it being a $220 boot, they basically sold you a $120 boot with a $100 premium charge for a free resole, where at least with Danner, they don't bake that price in for a potential resole that you might not ever use. And as far as I know, Danner is the first brand that's really doing this at scale for modern hiking boots. So then finally, is this the future of Danner? Are they actually moving forward towards technology and away from traditional? And is this the example of the evolution of the mountain boot? I think it is and it isn't. It clearly is inspired by the mountain boot. It has the same height, has the same like lace to toe style, the hole cut-ish style, you know, similar purposes, but it's the modernized version. But there's not much OG DNA in there, you know? Because at the end of that series, like, I wish Danner made like a leather chuck full, like leather this, leather that, leather, oh, everything's leather. But the problem with that kind of construction is it's heavy. It's hard to break in. It's never gonna be as comfortable as a really soft foam underneath your foot. And so that's what Danner's clearly doing, is they're moving away from the traditional, the harder underfoot, the stuff that smaller companies like the Pacific Northwest brands can do, where Danner's so big, they need boots that fit. They need them to be comfortable. They don't want a ton of returns. They don't want to deal with customers being like, I can't even wear these boots, there's too much leather. And so it makes sense for Danner, and it is a progression forward, but at the same time, it is very, very similar to the rest of these boots on the market, except for that one little thing that you can actually get these resold. Do I think it's a flop or the future of Danner? It clearly is the future, and it's cool that they're actually trying to make modern boots resolable, so it's not this just throwaway junk that the vast majority of cheap footwear is. But at the same time, it's closer to these boots than it is to the mountain boot. So let me know what you guys think and your experience in these and the resolability of Danners if you've had some experience, and check these out, be links in the description. So even though the GTX strays from the original concept, it is an evolution of the concept. And that's why I think the Danner, the old school mountain boots, kind of got outdated and they didn't need to make them in true like mountaineering boots fashion. because the modern technology improved what they were doing initially to make it a better boot for most consumers. Is it as durable? Is it as rigid? Probably not, but over time with technology and material advancements, people's preferences change. That's part of why people love heritage boots so much, because they haven't been outdated. They still stay strong, even though all this modern technology has changed things. And just to round it out even more, here's one more modernized version of the mountain boot, just to put it into context. This is all of our boot accessories that we've slowly developed over the last 4 years as we've done more and more boot reviews and realized how many things are missing in the market. So be sure to check out all these below. They make great gifts, self-gifts, and it's a huge way that you can help support the channel. So check them out below. The Danner Mountain Boot is one of the most iconic boots of all time, and over the last few decades, they've changed it slowly to accommodate modern buyers and modern wearers, because they slowly moved away from these being some of the top hiking boots in the world. And as modern technology and material science advanced, these kind of got left in the dust a little bit. As they moved away from heavy leather, big chunky soles, really rigid, and basically just leather tanks around your feet. Instead, most people started moving towards modern foam-based hikers. So when Danner created the Mountain 45, they wanted to create an evolution of the mountain boot, in their words, to make the most advanced hiker to date. So we got a pair of the new Proof X Danner collaboration pair from Huckberry to cut in half and run through all of our tests to really figure out, is this actually the most advanced hiker to date? What makes it so advanced? Is it actually based on the mountain boot, or does it just look like it? And does this live up to the mountain boot's legacy? So what is this boot? The brand is Proof, which is a Huckberry house brand. So it's a collaboration between Proof, Huckberry house brand, and Danner to make this really unique collaboration. And they do retail for $220. The style is the Mountain 45 Low. They weigh a pretty light 1 pound 9 ounces, especially compared to these other Danner mountain boot weights. And this is Proof's very first collaboration. And the way they position this product is Danner's most advanced hiker to date, now in an exclusive Proof colorway. Take on the roughest trails, from rocky high altitude trails to days-long backpacking trips. The Mountain 45 provides plenty of rebound and support to help you cruise through the most challenging hikes. The key is our new EnduroFoam Plus midsole, a robust cushioning system designed for greater energy return. The Mountain 45 delivers plenty of stability too, thanks to the super grippy Vibram outsole, combined with the premium leather upper inspired by our legendary Mountain Light hiker. The Mountain 45 will keep you going strong for years to come, because it's recraftable too. Proof is one of Huckberry's house brands built around premium performance apparel for a life in motion. Classic designs powered by modern performance fabrics, versatile gear for travel workouts and everyday wear, designed in Austin and tested by the Huckberry team, gear for growth. And if you do want a pair of these, check them out via links in my description. So now, what actually makes a mountain boot, at least when it comes to the leather? Well, one thing is the hole cut design. It's basically one single piece that wraps all the way around the boot. It's really thick, heavy duty leather because it's made to be durable and last a really long time. And it's a lace and toe pattern where the laces go all the way to the end of the boot, essentially, so you can tighten it in certain spots, skip laces, so you can just adjust the boot exactly how you need for really intense hikes. So what about this boot? Well, they say it's a nubuck leather upper. Our top grain leather is sanded on the outside to give it a slight nap with velvet-like feel. This leather upper is extremely durable while offering a shorter and more comfortable break-in period. So is it nubuck leather? What is nubuck? Well, nubuck is a higher cross-section cut where it still has some of the grain in it, but it's slightly sanded down exactly like they said. But this looks a lot more like suede. And suede it looks similar because it's still really fuzzy because it's lower in the cross section, but it doesn't have any of that grain to keep all those loose fibers together. But we'll see when we get it actually cut in half. And this is important for a hiking boot because there's a reason why they use really rigid, thick leather on these old mountain boots. It's because it's really durable, it structures the foot a lot more, and it doesn't stretch nearly as much as suede because you do have that really structural grain pattern. The Mountain 45 has done a few things to somewhat mitigate that, because you can see the regular mountain boots just all the way leather all the way down, where this one has this bumper that runs all the way around the shoe. So that's gonna give it some additional structure above just being suede all the way through. But what is this actual bumper that runs around? Well, I think it's the TPU mudguard. They say it's a Liba Smart TPU mudguard, offers increased durability without adding weight. It's gotta be this. And it's really an interesting feel because it's kind of squishy, so I don't really know what the material is. We did a little, if you look at this back stay section right here that has almost the same texture, it's just like a little different color. You can look at the cross section, that looks like fake leather. So my thought is that this is probably fake leather and it's just rolled over to try to help mitigate some of that extra stretch and give it a little bit of extra durability, and obviously it's for the aesthetics of it too. So if I cut into this material, it is pretty resistant to being cut, but it doesn't look like leather. Like those fibers are almost too blue to be leather. But once again, I don't know. It's hard to tell, so we'll have to really see when we get it cut in half. But we still did the puncture test on these materials, and here's the results. Pretty impressive results. So maybe I'm wrong about something. Maybe it is a nubuck. Maybe there's an additional layer on the inside I'm just not seeing. And speaking of the inside of the boot, part of what makes these mountain boots so interesting is this accordion folding tongue. So what do we have in the Proof X Danner Mountain 45s? It's not an accordion tongue, it's a fully gusseted tongue, so you still get the water resistance and debris resistance, but it's not an accordion fold. Does that matter enough that I'm like, oh, I'm not buying it? Not really, because this is kind of where you start to see the differences between an old school boot that had natural materials and didn't have a lot of synthetic materials to use to their advantage, and so they just had to literally fold the leather on top of itself to get it to be water resistant and keep all that junk out. Whereas with modern materials, you can still keep that out, and it's perforated so you get some airflow through, and I don't think this is waterproof. Yeah, it's non-waterproof, so you don't get that waterproof resistance, but it's gonna keep a lot of the debris out. Then if we look deeper on the inside, this is one thing about what I was saying in the intro, is Danner has slowly adjusted this former hiking boot to be more of a casual boot as the consumers basically dictate what this boot is for. You know, it was really popular when it was in the early days of mountaineering because this was the top of technology to make boots. But in 2026, there's a lot more technology that offers a lot of advantages that old school materials don't. And so over time, they've adjusted the insides of these boots to match modern consumers. And that includes the lining, because I think back in the day, it was probably a leather lining, but now it's at a point where they use a synthetic lining. It's still a really durable material. But if you look at the Mountain 45s, it's mostly just a regular sneaker lining, and it's got a removable insole. It looks like a nice, it's ortholite foam, and you can see it's a pretty generous last, and it even has your little 8 millimeters of drop. But what do they actually say about this footbed? Well, they say multiple layers of varying densities are combined for maximum cushioning support. The entire footbed is made of open cell polyurethane for heat dispersion and air circulation. That's why we use ortholite in our saddle soles, because ortholite makes easily the best open cell foam in the entire world. Because there's certain features, there's certain benefits you can only get from open cell foam compared to closed cell foam. And is it varying densities combined for maximum? I think it's just a single density. So I don't know if they're talking about the other layers underneath of it, because underneath you can see it's a foam lasting material. So, but as far as I can see, this is just one single layer of ortholite foam. But we did the ball and bar drop test comparing it to the Danners. Here's the results. So as you can see, modern technology does improve the rebound and the responsiveness of these boots and shoes. And that increased rebound is a big part of the initial description, because they call it their Enduro Foam midsole. And they say in their description, the key to our new Enduro Foam Plus midsole, a robust cushioning system designed for greater energy return. So obviously this layer right here is all that Enduro foam. How's that compared to the vintage, the old school Danner mountain boots? Both of them have a foam midsole, but obviously the modern Mountain 45 has this Enduro foam. It's a lot lighter weight, it's a lot more rebound, has a lot more squish to it, whereas the regular mountain boots are all just about reducing that shock from every single step. It's not one of these really high-end, high rebound foams. It's just an old school foam. It's gonna be a lot more durable, it's probably gonna last a lot longer, but you don't get that high-end springiness from this Enduro foam. And at the same time, you've still got the Vibram outsole on the bottom, but it's also echoed basically the same thing, where this is a pretty thick, chunky outsole. Here's your different measurements of how thick it is. Compared to this outsole, it's pretty thin. You know, you've got some pretty big lugs on there, because they said it's their Mega Grip outsole. And they said it's specially formulated for superior wet and dry grip with a wider track lug pattern to boost stability on uneven ground. And so it looks really thin in between the lugs, and the lugs are pretty tall. And if you look at any other outsole, that's basically how it is, but it's just a more pared down, a thinner, more slim and lightweight version of an old school outsole. And the thing that really surprised me the most was how rigid the shoe is. You know, because we even cut apart the other Huckberry Mountain 45, and it had some cool materials. It looks pretty different actually, but it wasn't the most rigid shoe, especially for a hiker. But this Mountain 45, I can hardly even bend it. Like, this is me trying to bend it actually. You know, it takes a lot to actually get it to kink over. And I don't know what that's from, because this still has the same rocker plate as the other Mountain 45. You can see it's the exact same position. It's peeping through all the different areas, and this one's not nearly as stiff. And so there's something going on the inside of this shoe that makes it more rigid than even the regular mountain boots. And that's one of the most important parts of the mountain boots, is how rigid they were. Because if you're hiking uphill and you don't have any shoes on, all that weight and all that stress and pressure is gonna go to the arch of your foot and into your calf. But if you have a really rigid shoe or boot, all that weight goes into the actual shoe and is pushed back out. So it doesn't completely reduce all the weight, but it definitely helps spring you forward. Oh gosh, that killed my iPad. Like that. And compared to all the other features that are similar to the mountain boot, that's probably the most important when it comes to the functionality of this actually being a mountain hiking boot. And it is rigid. So let's cut these things in half, figure out, is this actually nubuck or is it suede? Is this bumper leather? And why is this one so much more rigid than the previous version we cut apart? All right, we got it cut in half, and if you're not subscribed, consider pushing the little subscribe button. Check out our handmade leather goods, our saddle sole we just released, all the collaborations we have coming out this year. We got a bunch of sweet stuff, cool stuff restocking, and that's how we're able to do this 3 times a week, every week, literally every week for the last like 6 years. So thank you guys for your support. Now, let's see what's inside. So why is this so rigid? It's that layer right there. You can see in the other version that we had, and these are different versions, you know, it's not a one-for-one comparison, but we're just trying to suss out why it's so much more rigid. This pair does not have that really thick layer right there. And that looks like wood. I'd like to, did they put wood in a pair of Danner boots? If that's true, that is absolutely insane. Because that would be like the most old school callback of all time, because even these mountain boots don't have wood in them. Usually you only see wood in like old military boots or some like vintage Doc Martens and stuff. So is this wood? I hope it's wood. That'd be so cool if it was wood. Let's get in there and find out. Uh-oh, I see writing on it. Okay, that's fiberboard. I thought it might be wood. Fiberboard's a better option, for sure, because if this was wood and you went like this, you'd just snap the wood. But fiberboard it's basically like really hardly compacted like paper, and so it has similar structure to leather where it's multiple layers, and those multiple layers allow it to have that structure that just the fibers of wood would break and snap. I just thought it'd just be cool to have wood inside of like a modern Danner mountain boot. I think it would just be, it would be completely impractical and you would not want to do it, but it would have been funny if they did. But what about the other leathers? Is this a nubuck or is it just suede? Well, it has a fabric backer on it. And you can see that this toe bumper, or I guess it's a bumper that runs all the way around the boot. It's not technically a double layer. It looks like it's pretty well skived down halfway through this bumper, which, you know, isn't the biggest deal, but it'd be extra durable if it was. But also make it wider, you know, so there's some caveats there. But is it actually nubuck or is it just suede? This is why it's so hard to tell what's actually in these shoes, because even when you dissect it, sometimes it's hard to tell. I don't know, that doesn't look like nubuck to me. I don't think that's nubuck. That looks like a really thick suede to me. Because if you look really closely back here, there's a little bit of glue, but the glue is still on top of really fibrous texture. So if it's fibery here and it's fibery here, nubuck looks like this. It's almost like a microfiber texture compared to this is a suede texture. And so if this was really a nubuck, one side would have suede because it's lower in the cross section, but the other side would have the sanded down grain, which would make it look more like a microfiber. But that looks more like a suede to me. So maybe technically it's a really, really heavily sanded nubuck, but I don't know. I think that's closer to a suede. So we'll reach out to them and see. So after recording this, I reached out just to get clarification on the nubuck. Is it suede, is it nubuck? And it is actually suede. All the rest of the Mountain 45s that Danner offers is a true nubuck. But with this one, where it's a proof collaboration, it's a more elevated brand, I think they were a little more concerned about the aesthetic and the look. But we ran all the tests on the suede versus nubuck. They still are fairly comparable, and suede can be really good. It's just, how is it used? How thick is it? What is the application it's for? I still lean towards liking nubuck more than suede, but at least now you have all the information. But what about this other material right here? It's so hard to tell because it has like a blue hue to it, but that's why the lighter's so important. The lighter exposes all. Because if it's fake leather, it'll melt. If it's real leather, it won't. Yeah, that's real leather. Nice, Danner. Nice. Should we double check my thought that this was fake leather? This one's hard to tell because it definitely does have a plastic layer on top. So let me burn the back side of it. That might be leather too, actually. So that's actually surprising. So this bumper is leather. This little backstay is leather. Obviously this is leather, but I don't think it's nubuck. I think it's suede. And I've kind of felt that way even before I even touched the shoes because suede doesn't hold its shape. See how much more kinked and it almost looks like baggy. So then is this the modern evolution of the iconic mountain boot? I think it is. You know, I think it's a pretty far evolved version of it. You know, it's missing the accordion tongue. It does have that hole cut look, but it's a little cheaper leather. It still has the outsole and midsole combination. It's the lace-to-toe pattern. Materials are very different, but the concept is the same. It has that really rigid plate running through the entirety of the shoe. It's built for the same purpose, just with modern technology and modern materials. And so to me, it clearly is. You know, if it didn't have this plate running through it, I'd be like, it's mostly just a regular shoe. But this thing is so freaking rigid compared to any other light hiker that we've seen similar to this. So to me, I think it is. You know, and just look at the aesthetic of it. You know, it's got the similar eyelets, it's got that hole cut kind of pattern. So to me, I think it's a cool reimagining of an iconic boot. But at the end of the day, it's still a lighter weight version than the mountain boot. It's literally lighter weight. It's made for lighter weight hiking. It's gonna give you a lot more squish, and it maybe not give you quite as much rigidity through the entirety of the shoe because of how much more rigid the upper is. So it's a modernized, more pared back, lighter weight version of the mountain boot. But all the DNA is there. I think through and through, that's a mountain boot. So now you got two modern versions with literally all of the other Danner mountain boots to see how it's evolved over time, to see what Danner's taken from the heritage of the mountain boot and applied to the modernized stuff with the bumpers, with the hole cut style, with the type of eyelets, with the short height, with a lot of rigidity. So they still translate a lot of that over to their modern boots. And I think that's why the actual mountain boots aren't built like they used to, because they don't need to be built like they used to, which is unfortunate because I still want a true Danner mountain boot. I still want Danner to do like a 100-year anniversary. I don't even know when they came out, a 50-year anniversary. Bring me another project, Danner. Let's make the ultimate old school Danner mountain, because we've seen that Danner has adjusted all their classic styles to fit all those different needs and all those desires. And then they've also evolved the concept for the modern consumer, but there's something missing, and it's the classic, true to the original Danner mountain boot. And that's what I want. That's all I want from Danner. Like, yeah, I don't have to be involved in it. Like, I'll even consult for free. I just want Danner to make the ultimate mountain boot. The old school mountain boots, because there's still brands out there doing it. There's some handmade brands like Dundas that's making like basically a mountain boot. So we might do like a Danner mountain boot killer compilation video just to kind of back this one up. Like, okay, if you're looking for what I'm looking for from Danner, here's some options. And for the last and final video, here is the grand finale, going through all the information. And stick around at the end, because then we're gonna do final rankings again and give you all the information that you actually need to make a smart decision. Pretty tough trying to figure out the difference between all the different Danner mountain boots, because they all look the same and the description on the site does not give you any clues as to what they are, what makes them different, why you might want one over the other and the intended use. And so we spent over $1,700 to try and finally figure this out. And we labeled every single one because they look so similar, got these hang tags on everything, because I can't keep them straight to save my life, even though we have them in front of us and they're all cut in half. And so we're finally gonna settle, why does Danner have 4 of the same boots and why you might want one based on your needs. And my personal needs were to find my perfect mountain boot, because even though I've critiqued these pretty hard and gone pretty tough on them, I love the Danner brand. It's the brand that really started this mountain boot style. This is the boot style that really made Danner what it is. And it's still one of the top hiking boots today for people that are looking for a more casual, somewhat stylish looking hiking boot. But none of them quite hit the mark for me. So at the end of this video, I'm gonna give Danner my pitch to hopefully make what I think they should make, to make the ultimate heritage Danner boot that harkens back to the classic mountain boot while representing that heritage and this new technology that's come out in the boot world, wrapping it all up into what I would consider the perfect mountain boot. So let's start going through this. We're gonna go layer by layer, piece by piece, so you can get a full understanding of every single part of these boots and what you might want for one thing or another. So we'll start with the leather first, obviously. And as we go through this, we're gonna put the boot information on screen so you know the price and all the other stuff that's not worth going over. So we're gonna go through this order. It's gonna be light 1, light 2, trail, and pass. I'm already screwing it up. So the light 1 and the trail basically have the exact same leather. It's about 2.5 millimeters thick, so plenty durable and tough for a true hiking boot. It's a really natural leather without a lot of plastic coatings or pigment on top, so it's gonna age really naturally. It's gonna develop that beautiful patina over time, that depth of color, the highlights, the lowlights that you only get from a non-coated leather. At the same time, it's going to potentially stain more and it's gonna change color a lot over time. So the boot color you get is not gonna be the boot color you have in a few months, especially after you wear them. The Trail 2s, on the other hand, have a really heavy pigment on top, so it's not gonna age in the same way. It's gonna stay pretty much the same color until you really start scratching off that top coat, and that's where the flaw of this type of leather comes in, because as soon as you scratch that off, you're exposing the true color, which is a higher contrast than something without the coat on top. But it is just as thick as the other 2 leathers at 2.5 millimeters thick, and with this top coat on it, it is a little bit more water repellent, whereas the other leathers, they do absorb water as soon as you get them wet. Because of that top coat, you are gonna get more visible wrinkles, but it's also not gonna stain as much because you have that top coat on top. Then we obviously covered the trail leather because it's basically the same as the one. So if we move to the pass, this is the best leather in my opinion, because it's a Horween leather, one of the most famous tanneries in the entire world. They're based out of Chicago, Illinois. It's really close to the same leather as the trail and the one. just more conditioning and compounds worked into the leather, and it's one of Horween's oldest and most popular tanning recipes, the famous Chrome XL. And it is a little bit thinner, a little bit closer to 2 millimeters, but still within that 2 to 2.5 millimeter thickness you want for a decent quality boot that has some durability. So when it comes to the most durable leather, they're all probably gonna be about the same. There's not a big enough difference to really say one's gonna be significantly more. You could say I forgot what it's called. You could say the Pass is a little bit more casual, maybe not as durable, but they're so close that I would just say get whichever one you like the look of most, unless you want some water repellency. Then if we move to the lining, the one thing that let me down, I wanted a full leather lining in at least one of these. So starting with the light one, it's this jersey type material. It's gonna be breathable, it's really light, but it's not gonna be very durable. It's basically like a sneaker liner. This is their non-waterproof version, but they also have a waterproof version that has a different lining, that's actually the exact same as the Trail 2. This lining is a little bit stiffer, it's gonna be a little bit more durable, and obviously it's backed with that Gore-Tex waterproof lining, which makes these boots a little less breathable because even though they say it lets vapor out and stuff, it's still hotter than a non-waterproof boot. Then if we look at the Trails, this one is so close because it is technically fully leather lined. It's a heavily pigmented leather and it's a decent leather, but we'll kind of go over why it didn't quite pass the full leather line thing I was looking for with this insole in a bit. But leather's gonna be a little less breathable, it's gonna be more durable, and honestly, it's probably the most durable lining out of all 4 of them. But also it's not waterproof, so you don't get that Gore-Tex lining in between the layers because it seems like it's more casually based than anything. And then we look at the Pass, and this is the one I was really hoping that this tan leather was fully leather lined, because this is a lot better leather than the lining in the Trail, but as you can see, it just goes up to the collar and then it stops, and you've got a similar lining to the light ones, and it's gonna be about as durable as the light one. And if I were to rank these from most durable to least durable linings, surprisingly, the Trail is probably the most durable lining. Then I'd go the Mountain Light 2 or the Mountain Light 1 with the waterproof lining, and then the least durable lining, I would say this version of the not waterproof version of the Mountain Light 1 and the Pass. Then to the upper pattern, that really is more about taste than anything, but there are some differences. The lights have the exact same pattern. It's the original, it's more close to the original mountain boot pattern that was popularized in the 70s and 80s. The Trails have a completely different, more simplified pattern in the upper, and especially the tongue. So it seems like it's more for the comfort and flexibility, more towards the casual end pattern. And then the Pass, once again, I love the Pass. I think it's so cool. I love this little collar on top and how it's two-tone and how it flexes. It's not technically a hole cut boot in the same way as the other ones because you got a separate tongue piece, a little cutout there. The tongue still accordion folds like the other two, but it's a lighter leather, so you kind of get the in-between the more casual Trail and the more dedicated lights kind of somewhere in the middle when it comes to the pattern. But functionally, they're probably not a huge difference between the two of them. Obviously, the lights are gonna be a little bit stiffer on foot, harder to bend, and then the Trails will be a little bit more flexible. Now to the real heart of the boot, the thing that makes the boots perform in a certain way and feel different underfoot, which is the sole construction. Basically everything from where your foot is all the way down to the ground. Speaking of construction, all 4 of these are a stitch down construction, single row of stitching, and this is a really good style of construction. It's really popular with really heavy duty boots and durable boots and this heritage traditionally made style. It helps keep dirt out and water out. It's really durable, it makes them resolable, and it's the traditional way of making this style of boot. I believe it was the traditional way of making the original mountain boots in the 70s. Now let's start looking at the outsole, working our way up. The Trails have the exact same outsole. It's the Kletter Lift Vibram outsole, lots of grip, pretty durable. It's 8 millimeters thick. I'll put the diameters of each of these on screen. And this is a really good Trail outsole. It's gonna last a long time. You know, it's not quite as thick as like your V100 dedicated, really thick rubber outsoles. But we'll go over why it's thinner when we get to the midsole. Then if we look at the Trail, kind of the opposite approach. This has that same pattern, but it's not hard rubber. This is a blown rubber, which is essentially rubber foam. And so it's gonna be a lot squishier, but less durable. It's probably gonna be more comfortable underfoot, but it's gonna wear out faster than the harder rubbers. The Pass is a pretty unique outsole because it's still the Kletter Lift outsole, but it's thinner. It's 6 millimeters, so functionally it's somewhere in between the Trail and the Light because it's gonna be more flexible but less durable. You can still hike in it all day, but it's gonna wear out faster, and it rides a little bit between a casual and a performance hiking boot. Then above that, you have the midsole, and that's where you get a lot of the squish of this boot. Both of the lights and the pass have the same midsole. It's around 45 Shore A. It's a nice, soft, squishy foam, giving you that impact resistance, giving you a little bit of squish underfoot, while still maintaining the durability of that harder rubber outsole. And then the trails, like we mentioned, is just a blown rubber all the way through. So it's almost as if you took that foam midsole from the other three and you shaped it into this cletter lift pattern without it being hard rubber. You're basically standing on the midsole. So there really is no like dedicated midsole to this, but you still get the squish of the midsole without the hard rubber that we just talked about. Then above that, we're gonna call it the slip sole. It's the layer right above that the stitch down stitch through the upper that's flared out, down through that slip sole, and then the foam midsole and outsole are glued to that. Both of the lights, they have a rubber slip sole. The light one is thinner, the two is a little bit thicker, so the two is gonna be more rigid, the one's gonna be more flexible. Obviously that matters to some degree when it comes to hiking, because if you want a more rigid style boot where you don't wanna overstretch your calves and wear them out and you wanna rely on the rigidity of a boot, you might wanna go with the thicker light twos slip sole, versus the light one is a little bit more casual and it's gonna be more flexible and comfortable in its own way because it's more flexible. Then if you look at the trails, they have the same slip sole as the twos. And the pass has a really interesting hard synthetic slip sole that acts as a shank. It's structured and has little columns in it. And there's a heel relief where a foam pad fits into it. So from most rigid to least rigid, the light twos are gonna be the most rigid. The pass is probably next because it's a harder, more synthetic, like plasticky slip sole. Then I would say the light ones and the most flexible, even though it has that thicker slip sole, is the mountain trails. So just generally the more flexible, the more casually oriented, the more rigid, the more hiking and more performance oriented. Then if we look at the really internal parts that you would never see unless you actually cut them in half, the lasting board and the shank, which really helps support the arch of the boot. All of them have a fiberboard lasting board and a fiberglass shank, except for the pass, because like we talked about, that slip sole basically is the shank. People love fiberglass shanks because they're still flexible while giving you support. They're lighter than a steel shank. They don't rust. And all of them have fiberboard on top of that with a little bit of foam on all of them except for the pass. A little bit of foam is gonna make all of them a little bit more comfortable than the pass, but it's still just a tiny layer that the insoles would maybe make a little bit more of a difference than that little layer of foam. But one thing that I really was surprised about was that foam layer that we were talking about in the mountain trails. It's just exposed. So when you put your foot in here, they didn't come with an insole. So you have this half sock liner with the leather from the lining, but right here at the ball of your foot where you get a lot of wear is just that open cell foam. And if you really wear these hard, you're gonna wear through that. And then you're gonna be standing on top of the fiberboard. Even though this is fully leather lined, not having leather through the forefoot kind of took the wind out of my sails when it came to liking this one and it being mostly leather lined. Finally, the last thing I want to cover is the last. And if you don't know what a last is, it's that plastic foot shaped mold that the boot is built around that gives it its individual shape and size. And they're all really narrow, just across the board. They're all narrow because this is a vintage style hiking boot and just hiking boots in general, especially really hard hiking boots. It's an old school hiking boot where you wanted your foot fully locked into the boot at the expense of some of the comfort and toe squish. So keep that in mind and don't be afraid to get their wider widths in some of these that offer that. And if you want some more information on why this style of boot is narrow and why certain modern hiking boots are wider and the pros and cons of each, go watch the Ultra video for some information on why wide toe box boots aren't always the best. And then go watch the recent Nix video with their Builder Pro built on that Thurman Munson last for more of the other side of the spectrum's argument. That being said, the Light 1, 2, and Trails are built on the original 650 last that's really narrow. The Pass is built on a slightly wider last, the 503, which I prefer out of the 2 last because it is wider, it's more casual oriented, and it's a lot more comfortable to walk around in and break in. So even though that was wildly confusing when we first got these and their website does not help in any way, now that we've got all these boots broken down layer by layer, there seems to be a pretty clear trend as to what their intended use is for. And all Danner has to do to make this video obsolete is just update their website. And so to explain what their uses are for, let's start with the most dedicated hiker boot of the bunch, working towards casual. So clearly the Trail 2 is the most rugged, it's the most rigid, it's the heaviest duty of the 4, it's waterproof, it's the most dedicated hiking boot out of the group, and even the leather is dedicated for hiking. You can still wear it casually, but it's gonna be really stiff, it's gonna be tough to break in, and that's why you might wanna look at the Light 1 with more leather options,
weekends. It's gonna be a more versatile hiking boot where you can actually use it for casual use and just lighter trails. You could easily use it for one or the other, but it's a little bit more towards the hiking end of the spectrum. And to me, it's the closest to the original true mountain boot. And it also comes in waterproof and non-waterproof options. So out of the bunch, it seems like it has the most potential uses. Then next down, I'd go with the Pass, because this is a lot more of a casual boot side of the spectrum, but not fully casual, because it's still built in a traditional way. It's gonna be more comfortable than the other two lights. It's a little bit more specialized, fancy leather that leather nerds love, like myself, that Horween Chrome XL. It definitely, to me, looks the coolest. I love the look of this boot. I think it looks so good. And you could still definitely hike in these all day, but it is more towards the casual end with that thinner outsole and some of the features we talked about. And then finally, the trails. This is just basically a fully casual boot. If you want the look of a mountain boot, but you don't want the heavy, stiff bricks on your feet walking around, that's exactly what they built this for. It has the vibe of the mountain boot, but not any of the hard, heavy use stuff that makes them a little bit hard for casual use. And if I were to choose one as my personal favorite, the one that got closest to my dream mountain boot, no surprise, the Mountain Pass. I think this boot is so close to being so cool. And it's just missing a couple things. So $1,700, $2,000 later, we finally solved the Danner mountain boot enigma. And now, Danner, if you're watching this, let me pitch to you what I think you should make. That would be my dream mountain boot. And I think a lot of people would like it too and really want it. Maybe a little bit closer to that legacy boot that really built the Danner name. And it could be one hell of a casual hiking boot. And you can make it from mostly the parts that you have already implemented in all these various boots combined into one. So leather, I choose the Horween Rio Chrome XL from the Pass. For the lining, I would just go full leather lining with this yellow from the Pass once again. Pattern from the Pass, and I get why someone might want the original one. I just think this one looks really, really good. Stitch down construction, just like all of them, maybe double row stitch it. The beefy version of the Kletter Lift outsole, the standard foam midsole that's basically in all of them, this thinner slip sole from the One to give you a little bit more flexibility. And then for some parts that they don't currently use, I would just beg for a leather lasting board. You get the durability of it, the resoleability, you get the smell reduction, because then your foot's not sitting on foam or synthetics. It doesn't smell as bad. It's better. It's just better in every way, in my opinion, except for maybe a little sacrifice in comfort, but that's what you can solve with the insoles. Then as for the last, I'd go with the 503 last. And once again, I think you could make a case for the original last, but I just like the more comfortable 503 last. And I'd honestly go even a wider last if possible. And that to me would be the ultimate modernized mountain boot. Please make it, Danner. I want that boot so bad. And I feel like so many people would love it and buy it. And it's mostly from existing parts. I think it could work. I think it would sell. And I know I've done a little shit talking about the mountain boots in the past and some of your other boots, but please make that boot. I'll buy it. I would do anything for that boot, even if it's just a small run, just like a one-time batch for us true boot nerds that love the heritage and the story of Danner. I would love that boot. So let me know what you guys think and let Danner know that you want him to make that boot. Even just in the comments. You don't have to blow up their emails or anything. Just in the comments, if you want that boot, maybe I can send them a couple emails like, look, people want this boot. And thanks for watching this video and sticking through all that raw information. If you can support this video, it's a very expensive series to do. And if you want a pair of these, check them out. The link in the description. On occasion, it helps out the channel. And thank you guys so much for everything you do and helping us see what you're actually buying, figuring out what these boots actually are by seeing the internal components, and hopefully pressuring Danner into making a really cool boot.
So that's that. Let me know what you guys thought. It's probably a super long video. Let me know what you thought of the format. Give us some feedback, because I think these are valuable styles of videos. We just need to figure out how to do them, what's gonna bring the most value to you guys. And I'm still waiting to hear back from Danner on making the ultimate Danner mountain boot. Maybe this will convince them. So if you guys wanna see that boot, hit up Danner. Tell him you wanna see that. Support this video, because if this video gets 1 million views, I can go to Danner and be like, please make it, please, we all want that boot. And here's all your missing information and your rankings and all the information you need to make that smart buying decision. So let me know what you think and what you would choose. What's your perfect Danner mountain boot? Am I off anywhere? Thank you guys for all your support. Check out our handmade leather goods below. Check out our new saddle soles. Check out our collaborations. We haven't worked with Danner yet, so maybe that would be the collaboration. Come on, Danner. So thank you guys. See ya.